Michael question.
Yes.
About your ex-girlfriends.
About your childhood. I'm going to say terrible things about you.
Go right ahead. Won't be the first time.
Hi there. Welcome to this edition of the Los Angeles Times Emmy Contenders Chats. I'm Michael Ordoña. Today in the studio, we have an actor who's not so easy to introduce because he has more than 300 credits. He has played the clown prince of crime since 1993 and the savior of a galaxy far, far away since 1977. Now he's not only about to become a murderous doll, but he's appearing as Talus, the hardest steel training master of the Knights Templar on the History Channel's Nightfall. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Hamill.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome here.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Like so many, I've grown up watching you, so it's kind of neat to be here with you.
Well, that's nice to hear.
As opposed to, I hate being here with you, you're terrible. Something I didn't know about you until now, though, you grew up all over the place because you moved around with your Navy family.
Right.
But you were born in Oakland?
I was born in Oakland.
Do you have any Bay Area ties?
Well, a lot of relatives on my mother's side live up there, the Johnson side of the family. I don't even remember Oakland because we moved 6 weeks after I was born. Mm-hmm. I went to 9 schools in 12 years, so you're perpetually the new kid. So it was awkward because I once got the key of the city from Jerry Brown. I was so excited. And I thought, gee, I better have some credibility. So I started, doing research on Oakland. But as it turned out, there were 83 other people getting the key of the city that day.
Oh.
So it wasn't exactly exclusive. A lot of locks for those keys.
Right. Well, I'm afraid that's the wrong answer. The right answer was Oakland is great, Bay Area is best.
It is, though. I love that city. I feel completely at home there. It's like San Francisco without the pretense.
There is something to that.
Okay, I probably don't at me, folks. Just off the top of my head.
No,
I like San Francisco too. I played there in Amadeus.
Yes.
So it's a great theater city, and I'm sure we had a lot of patrons from Oakland as well.
I have to tell you that we're going to do something we don't usually do during these chats, and that's pepper you with a few fan questions.
Sure.
Because, word got out that you're going to be here, and there were a few fan questions.
Good.
But in researching you, I didn't realize just how expansive your career is. IMDb has you with 339 acting credits. Does that sound about right?
I don't know, because what happens is you do a certain volume of work and you can't keep up with it all, especially in voiceover, because you do a cartoon, it doesn't get on the air until 9 months to a year later.
Right.
And it's not like they send you an email, hey, your episode's on this Thursday. So it'll run into things like, the kids will be watching Cartoon Network. I went, shh, wait a minute. I think I'm that gangster lobster. And you go, oh yeah, I remember I did that. I forget these things. Somebody just retweeted the fact that I did the voice of Chucky more than 10 years ago on a robot chicken. Completely forgot about it. And I have to say, it was done in the style of Brad Dourif, who's so great in that part. I love the originals, but I did point out that the reboot, Chucky has a completely new origin. Mm-hmm. He's not a serial killer. It's a different origin. So I hope people know it'll be a very different Chucky.
Well, if we could jump to that a little bit, is there anything you can tell us about that origin or your approach?
It's just that I think it's okay to say, because I think the trailer makes it clear. It's about artificial intelligence and someone intentionally and maliciously playing with the operating system, not the supernatural origin of transferring a serial killer's soul into the doll. But it makes it very interesting because he's an innocent in the beginning. He's like a child. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the same background as in the original films, which I thought was a real plus, because when I first heard about it, I said, why aren't they using Brad Dourif? Sometimes you can be a pawn in someone's renegotiations, contractual renegotiations. And that's when they said, no, it's a complete reboot with all new people, both in front and behind the camera. And it's just a great part. I thought, this is a challenge. Like, I take these things, it's a big responsibility, these pop culture icons, you know, that I don't think I felt this much weight of the responsibility since The Joker, which I thought, you know, I was really cocky when I was auditioning, thinking I wouldn't get it. And then when I got it, I went, oh my gosh, you know, there's so many people that have a distinct idea of how he should sound. Whether it was Cesar Romero or Jack Nicholson. At that point, you know, all the others had not come along, or Heath Ledger hadn't come along yet. But I thought, ooh, boy, this is really tough. But you just have to trust your instincts and make it your own.
Yeah, what you're saying about the new Chucky raises a lot of interesting questions about how you approach that as an actor, because it seems like you start the role as one thing, and then I guess as a malicious code enters, all your motivation changes.
Exactly. And the thing is, the film was finished, you see, when they hired me, so I can look at the scene, I can hear the puppeteer's production track.
Right.
But I told Lars Klevberg and all of the producers, you're going to have to be my seeing eye dog, because you know this film much better than I do in terms of the progression of his transformation from this innocent young child to this crazy, murderous doll. And by the way, I mean, to give full credit, when I saw Child's Play back in 1988, I said, finally, after 25 years, they took a 1963 episode of Twilight Zone called Living Doll with Telly Savalas and the great June Foray, who at that time was the voice of Chatty Cathy, the first talking doll, as the voice of Talkie Tina. And I remember I got to stay up late in the summer. It was past my bedtime, and I loved Twilight Zone. So I'd see them all in summer reruns. And that moment, I remember my parents had gone to a cocktail party. I was all by myself. And she's got the angelic face. And, you know, Telly Savalas is playing this abusive father who's totally unsympathetic. And she says to him, I'm Talkie Tina, and I'm going to kill you. It was fantastic. But of course, it was only 25 minutes long. And they were able to flesh it out into a whole feature film for Child's Play. And it deserves it, because it's one of those kind of spooky campfire stories that are fun to pass on to the next generation.
Yeah, well, everybody's scared of dolls on some level.
They're creepy, aren't they? And creepy clowns. What is it?
Yeah. I think maybe dolls scare me more than clowns.
Yeah. Well, they have those fixed
That's
smiles that are kind of unnerving, to say the least.
Yeah, I remember that Twilight Zone episode distinctly.
Yeah.
But of course, you would know June Foray, because you know, of your...
Adore that woman. She was so tiny and petite. And of course, you know, people like her and Dawes Butler and Mel Blanc and Paul Frees, these are the idols that I, just admired so much growing up. And in those days, we didn't have Wikipedia. And of course, in traditional encyclopedias, they wouldn't have an entry on Rocky and Bullwinkle. I used to go to the record section, to the children's records, and look on the back of, like, Yogi Bear and the Looney Tunes, Daffy Duck. And yes, exactly. And of course, Rocky and Bullwinkle, and see all these names and remember them, because I just was so fascinated with it. I think before I was even in first grade, I saw an episode of the Walt Disney show where they were showing how cartoons were produced. And I never really thought about it before. You know, you imagine these things just emerge full blown, but the thousands of drawings and the background cells and all of it. And then to see a grown man in a suit and tie, Clarence Nash, doing Donald Duck. It blew my mind. I thought, you know, I guess intellectually I should have understood. There's grown-ups that go to work and that's their job.
Well, Why would you understand it then? I mean, you
I
just
held
pick
on
up-
to that, and I thought that's one day I want to do that so much. I love cartoons so much, and someday I hope I do a terrible Donald Duck, but maybe they can find another place for me in animation.
Well, you've apparently done okay as a voice actor.
Yeah, and what a revelation it was, because I went to Broadway to try and break out and get character roles, and who knew? I mean, it was because I loved Batman, I wanted to be a part of it, that I said to my agent, I'd love to get in on that, and I couldn't. I was amazed at how well written the scripts were, that they were writing up to young people, and rather than patronizing them. I mean, it was far from the Saturday morning Super Friends kind of approach, and it was, I think, meant to be a show that could be shared by the children with their parents, and it still holds up. They asked me to write an introduction for the Joker coffee table book, and that's when I went back and I watched all the Joker episodes again, and I was struck by everything came together beautifully. The scripts were well written, Shirley Walker's music, the art direction, everything. I was really spoiled by that, because that was, I had done one series as a teenager at Hanna-Barbera, and then I didn't do animation again for 20 years. And it was only because I requested to be a part of the Batman series that I was able to be a part of that. And I was struck by how well they held up, because they're set in this sort of Art Deco netherworld. Some things look retrograde, other things look futuristic. Just so well done, and it went away after the original series. I said, well, that was fun. I mean, I didn't expect it to go on as long as it did. And then a long period of time went by, and all these other great actors played the Joker. Kevin Michael Richardson and Jeff Bennett and Michael Emerson and on. And of course, Heath Ledger in the films, Jared Leto and so forth. But they brought me back for the Arkham games. I guess it was...
Arkham Asylum?
Yes, Arkham Asylum and Arkham Knights and Arkham City. And it was wonderful because they brought back all the original people. Kevin Conroy is my Batman.
Right.
And he's wonderful in the role, and just such a great person and a good friend. But all the people, it was like a reunion, and you don't really miss something until it's gone. And it was a great way to reconnect with all those people. And I teased Kevin Michael Richardson because he's a wonderful voiceover actor, and I said, I never got an Emmy nomination. You did it for one season. You get an Emmy nomination. But I shouldn't complain. I won a BAFTA for that, which I never would have believed. In fact, I lost so many times as the Joker, both Annie Awards and Video Game Awards, that when they announced that I'd been nominated for a BAFTA, I said, who am I up against? And when they said, one of them was Stephen Merchant, Ricky Gervais's partner.
Yeah.
And I said, he just beat me 2 weeks ago at the Video Game Awards. I'm not going to go 6,000 miles round trip. And he's British on top of it. And they tend to favor their own.
Yeah.
So what a shock. I got a phone call coming home from a voiceover recording, and it was one of the directors saying, you won. I said, oh, I felt terrible because, if you're nominated, you should at least show up. I mean, but, I thought, oh, that's a long way to go. And I know I'm going to lose. I just lost. He was nominated for the same game, as, that beat me at the VGAs. They don't exist anymore, just so.
Well, just goes to show. I mean, they should have given it to you, then they
and my wife's saying, no, let's go to London. We can go shopping.
Yeah.
I said, look who you're talking to. We can go shopping.
Wear a disguise. Show up as a Joker.
Well, no, I just hate shopping. I mean, I've learned to bring like a book when we go shopping together. I find a chair and read. She'll say, try this on, try this on, try this on. And I do. And so there's a little marriage tip for you. Pick your battles.
There's a lot to unpack there, but you were talking about the material for the Joker, and by now you've been playing Joker for a long time.
Right.
They brought you back for Killing Joke. The material is going to vary from writer to writer and project to project, but I think once you read that Alan Moore, you can't really go back.
Yeah, well, even the video games, I'm thinking, can we say and do this? Because since they're aimed at an older audience. Now, back in the day, it was under the auspices of standards and practices, the TV censors. So there's a long list of things you couldn't do. Push someone through plate glass.
Oh, really?
Punch people directly in the face. No alcohol, no drugs, the obvious things. But, and sometimes you get a script go, even back then where you're saying, wait a second, I have a Tommy gun in this. And I said, how can I thought there were no guns. And they said, no, standards and practices said you can't have handguns because children can get their hands on those. But you can have a Tommy gun because children can't get their hands on Tommy guns. So it's kind of a bizarre logic. But to address your question, yes, the material got far more explicit and grim and crazy. But every time I play the character, I like to pretend it's the first time I've ever done him. Oh. And they use him in very different ways. Sometimes he is supposed to be scary and malevolent, and other times he's more of a, there was a parody of Thelma and Louise where Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy team up and go off on these adventures. And you see Joker shuffling around the house in fluffy slippers. So he was meant to be sort of an object of pathos or comedy. So like I say, every episode you read it and say, how is the Joker meant to be in this particular incarnation? And like I say, the best thing to do is approach it like it's the first time you've ever done it.
It's interesting because I was wondering if your approach had built over time, but what you're saying makes sense, that it's got to be different for each project.
Well, also you find your sweet spot after a while. I mean, if you listen to the first season of The Simpsons, you go, oh my gosh, Dan Castellaneta sounds like Walter Matthau.
Yeah.
I told you, boy, he didn't get all round and funny till later. So in the Joker, I can tell my early episodes as opposed to the ones where you get more comfortable and you know where you're going. You slip into that crazy clown car, and it's a comfortable place to be. I love it because they cast with their ears, not their eyes, and you're liberated if you're not being seen to make choices you would never make. I wouldn't if you were on camera. You talked about how it's a different skill. It is, in the sense that a lot of times you have to make the dialogue pop, not just in the case of Joker and most animation, to sort of goose or make more colorful what is going to be more limited animation. So there's a stylization that's different than television or movies or theater.
Yeah, my thinking of different kinds of Jokers, my earliest references to Joker, besides the Adam West TV show.
Yeah, Cesar Romero.
Yeah, were the 70s Joker comic books. And those were like all played for laughs while he's killing people. You know.
And what other villain gets his own comic book? I mean, seriously, he's really like the Hamlet of comic book villains, destined to be played and reinterpreted over and over again. We have the Joaquin Phoenix version coming up. I can't wait for that. And I've always, I mean, there's so many of them that are so good. You listen to Jeff Bennett and you go, oh, he's got sort of a slyness that I like. I've never really heard a Joker where I said, oh, that's terrible. I like, there's something to like about all of them.
Well, actually, that leads us to one of the fan questions that I wanted to ask you. And this fan is here at the LA Times. His name's David, and he wanted to know if you had ever done a comparison of those live action Jokers and if you had a favorite. Probably Ledger, from what you said?
Oh, hello, Michael. Thank you for your question. Well, like I say, I think there's some, he was amazing because it was a complete reimagining of the character. You know, my character is joyful. He really loves his work. And I never saw, I mean, it was harrowing, the Ledger version, because it was almost like I don't know, he was joyless and almost like a heroin addict. And tongue-centric. It was really good. And he deservedly won an Oscar for it. So, but like with Jared Leto, I said, the only problem with that is there's not enough of him to really judge. I was hoping to see more of his Joker, because what I saw, I loved, but it was more focused on Harley than it was on him.
Yeah, there's supposedly like half an hour's worth of Leto Joker.
Is there? Maybe I should buy the DVD. There's probably deleted scenes.
I have to swing back to Nightfall
Yes.
before I forget, because
Swing back to, have we talked about it and I forgot?
only in the intro, I guess, because this is an Emmy contender chat.
Oh.
Yes, it's that important. So, Nightfall, you play Talus.
Yes.
I would imagine that one of the big draws for you to take that role was the chance to transform that way.
Completely. First of all, I read it and said, why would they think of me for this? And my agent is, don't talk yourself out of a job, moron. But no, I was flattered, because it was, I've said it's like Game of Thrones without the dragons, which is really kind of being facetious, because it's very different. But in terms of being an epic historical drama with a largely British cast, it's ironic, because later, once I got to know the production people, I said, what did make you think of it? And they said it was your voiceover work.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I can really compare it to with my on-camera roles. And like you say, you completely transform to the point where you look in the mirror and you go, it's not me. So it gives you license to be comfortable doing and saying things that you would never say in your real life.
Were there other draws? Like, I don't know if you're a history buff at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love history, and I especially love it when it's made entertaining by drawing you in with compelling characters and interesting storyline. The thing I felt was that I had sort of an idealized view of knights from Camelot and Ivanhoe, and it was all very gallant and pristine and clean and beautiful. And then you look at the life that these guys had, and they were one of the richest orders in the world. They started world banking, where you could deposit jewels and gold and so forth, and get a chit and cash it somewhere. That's how they became so wealthy. At one point, they owned the entire island of Cyprus, and yet they led these bleak lives, of poverty, even though they were so wealthy. And, with the research I was doing, I thought that to live in those times where 45 was considered old age, where you had to have 6 or 7 children so 2 could survive, it just, the pestilence and the disease and it's just, as I say, all the glamour of the 14th century.
Right.
But I'm one of those people that I don't feel good unless I have a shower every morning. I don't think these guys ever showered. They used body odor as a weapon. Yeah, because they.
Like my kids.
Well, you can only imagine what it's like when you think any minute could be your last, because the wholesale slaughter was unbelievable. Even that's a paradox. Men of God, I say at one point, if you complete the training, you shall become one of God's executioners.
Right.
And you say, really, God's executioners? Look, I know the 10 Commandments, and thou shalt not kill is one of my favorites. Very close to thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. But more than any of them, I like that one. And I thought, how can that be? How can those two things coexist? And yet you see Talus, the character I play, is such a zealot and so devoted to Christ and sure that his way is the right way. But I'm just having the time of my life. And I'm telling you this, Tom Cullen, who's the protagonist, you see it all through his eyes, is so empathetic and so soulful. He's much more multidimensional than my character. Although as the series progresses, you see different sides to Talus and even come to understand why he is the way he is.
Yeah, he has an awfully rough backstory.
You bet. And like I say, I mean, I just couldn't imagine living in those times, you know, with no deodorant or double ply Charmin.
I got to say at this point, the History Channel probably is cringing right now with your description of the time.
Oh, well, I said it's the goriest, most violent TV show available.
And they're saying, he talked about Tom Cullen. Couldn't they say he's dreamy? He's dreamy. He's dreamy.
Listen, I know dreamboats when I see one, and he's one.
He's
He's also really a great actor. So it's really a great experience. All these guys, now I didn't know a lot of them, these young initiates. They're all from English theater and, you know, very impressive to a person. Now, I never get to interact with the royals, like Ed Stoppard and so forth.
Yeah.
So I never, and I used to visit their sets, and they were so clean, and they had banquets laid out with fresh fruit. We were all eating gruel.
Yeah. They made you live like. Actually, speaking of that, there's a fan question from Emerald Stardust.
Okay.
Emerald Stardust on Twitter, who asks, what was the best thing about living in Prague while you're working on Nightfall?
Well, Prague is like breathtakingly beautiful. It escaped bombing during World War II.
Right.
Because Hitler wanted to retire there. That's what I heard. Emerald who?
Emerald Stardust.
Emerald Stardust. You might want to fact check me on this. But what I heard was that one of his generals moved into the palace of the wealthiest citizen in Prague and just raved about how wonderful it was. So with an eye towards retirement, they were completely spared the bombings. So what I'm saying is there are buildings that are centuries, you know, unchanged for centuries. So it's just beautiful, a beautiful city to visit. And we were shooting at the Barrandov Studios about half an hour from where we were living. It was great.
I want to totally change gears here so I can ask you another fan question.
Sure.
This one's from Michael Grant, who asks if you intend to direct another movie, maybe a sequel to a comic book movie.
You know how that came about? This company had done this sit down with Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner where they just reminisced about Star Trek. And so they wanted me to do the very same thing, you know, reminisce about Star Wars. And they only had, I don't think, 100,000, 150,000 to spend. I said, what if we do something that's fan related, but not so on the nose? And they said, well, what do you have in mind? Which I really didn't have anything in mind, although I thought, what exists that's already spectacular to see? And I thought of the comic book, the San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, yeah.
At that time, Morgan Spurling hadn't done his documentary. And so I hired all my voiceover pals. We didn't even have money for casting, really, to have casting sessions. I would just call people and say, hey, do you want to play a young hotshot executive from a movie studio? And he'd say, sure. And it was, you know, so we had an outline without it being fully scripted. But I have to tell you, if you're into voiceover actors, it's like the mad world of the voiceover scene. Because everybody's in it. You know, Tom Kenny's in it, and Jess Harnell, Billy West, James Arnold Taylor, and Roger Rose. I mean, I'm going to leave somebody out, and they're all going to be mad at me. But it's pretty much, I mean, Andrea Romano, who directed Batman, said, if you have a screening and a bomb goes off, you'll wipe out the entire voiceover community. So, yeah, it was fun. I don't have any direct plans, but I didn't have plans to go to Prague for 5 months to do this, so you never know.
Yeah.
Make me an offer.
There you go. A super fan, Randy Bookman, asks about your tendency to lightheartedly troll fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have some favorite instances of said trolling?
Well, I was just having fun, basically, because at one point, Carrie and I were a race to see who could get to 1 million the fastest.
Oh, yeah.
So I used to pull all these really outrageous stunts and promo them. You know, on Wednesday I say, this Saturday, you know. And just, you know, my kids say, Dad, you know what the problem with your Twitter feed is? I said, what? And they said, it's all dad humor. I said, what do you mean dad humor? It's funny, right? They go, well, I said, what is dad humor? They said, well, obvious, a lot of puns, not funny. I know, how dare they?
Yeah,
I thought,
kids.
well, if it's funny to me, it should be funny to fans. But like I say, it's all in fun because they're so obsessive. So they'll write like, hey, we didn't see Luke's metal hand fall to the rock when he disappeared and left his robes behind. I said, proving my theory that he just transported to a nudist planet. Now, to me, that's funny, but then you'll realize that a lot of the fans say, we'll take it on its face.
He's on a nudist.
Yeah, in episode 9, he's not dead. He just transported. So.
Luke Skywalker.
But it's all in fun, because what happens is I only got on Twitter because I did this low budget movie called Sushi Girl, and they said, will you go on Twitter to help promote it because we have no money in the budget for publicity? And I said, okay. And I started a Twitter account. I think it was 2010, and I tweeted about Sushi Girl and forgot all about it. My daughter Chelsea came and said, Dad, you haven't tweeted in like 3 weeks. I said, should I? They said, well, if you want to gain more followers. And I said, do I? She goes, well, yeah. And I said, Chelsea, look, who cares what I think? I mean, am I supposed to go on and tweet about I like blackberry jam more than strawberry jam? She goes, oh, if you tweeted that, your followers would go. I said, really? So I started playing with it like a toy. So usually you get up, you read the newspaper, you do a crossword puzzle, the jumble, whatever. Now I get up, I still do those things, but I'll go over and look at Twitter. So it's like publishing a newsletter.
Yeah.
Where you always have to think about content. So now when I read the news, I go, oh, I should save this because I can make a comment about it later. It's in a way, it's unhealthy. And I'm thinking of establishing tweetless Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I just can't take the pressure.
He's got a big smile on his face
Well-
by saying it's unhealthy.
Well, it is, because because people will write and say, "Who cares what you think?" Because you stick to acting. We don't want to hear about your politics. But I always figure, like, I don't really go out on talk shows and tell people how to vote or how to think.
Right.
But when you come into my space, it's like you feel freer to be yourself. And so people I guess, were surprised. I don't know what they thought I thought, but in these extraordinary times, it's hard not to react.
Well, you, of course, famously put out some Trump tweets in Joker voice.
Well, you know what happened? First of all, after all these years, I recognized really well-written, demented dialogue. So Matt Oswald, a comedian writer, retweeted one of his tweets and said, this sounds like something the Joker would say after releasing a swarm of killer bees over Gotham City. Because, and I said, exactly, because for years I've been thinking, this looks like, because there's a disconnect, like, Happy New Year to all, even you losers and haters, where he does where he does a parenthetical, exactly. That's one thing I do, is I don't change a word. So I don't put words in his mouth, I just do the words out of his mouth from the standpoint of a crazy psychopathic killer. What could possibly go wrong there? Well, you get some really fierce blowback. In fact, I'll start reading threads, and some of it is so upsetting. I mean, the language, people, please. I mean, I'm no prude, but I said, that's okay. I also say, look, I remember when you could disagree politically and still be friends. It's so contentious now and so divided that, I try and, counterbalance the more overt political tweets with adorable videos of puppies and babies.
Yeah.
I love the dodo.
I follow you, and I get a lot
of the dodo.
I get a lot of nice cat and dog videos.
Yes. Because we need that. We need some sort of safe place to go to where you don't have to pay too much attention to reality. It's exhausting.
Right. Well, it is quite a tonic to open Twitter and see a little puppy jump on someone's chest and fall asleep on her face.
Yeah, see, that's great. In fact, retweet that. I'll like it.
Okay, okay. All right, here's another fan question.
Okay.
This is from Chros TV, CHROS TV. Is there any specific filmmaker you've always wanted to work with but haven't yet? And also, greetings from Austria.
And what was the last part?
Greetings from Austria.
Oh, nice.
So I guess I should have read it in an Austrian accent.
Well, I've met Arnold Schwarzenegger. And by the way, I met him early in his career before he'd only done Stay Hungry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really early.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And he very nice guy. You know, Star Wars was at its peak. He wanted to meet me. I went and had coffee with him. And I said, can I be really honest with you? Please do. I said, well, if you're going to listen, my advice would be lose the accent because it'll just increase. You can always play Austrian or German characters, but if you lose the accent, it just opens you up to play broaden a choice of roles. Mm-hmm. And he nodded, and I said, and the other thing is that name. You've got to, first of all, nobody can pronounce it, and it's so long. Unless you plan on having a career making movies with no one but Cher, it'll never fit on the marquee. So I told Arnold Schwarzenegger, lose your accent and change your name. Within 2 years, he was the biggest star in Hollywood. Right. So I thought maybe I should do an advice book where you, like that Seinfeld episode, where you just do the opposite yeah. of everything I tell you to do. But your question about directors I'd love to work with, it's just too long. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's obvious people like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg. I mean, I did Amazing Stories, but he didn't direct it. But back in time, I mean, Frank Capra, and I don't want to get started, John Ford. I mean, I have a list of really favorite directors, but it's not like, oh, I want to make a movie with them so much. I enjoy their films very, very much, mm-hmm. and that's enough for me, you know, because, you know, and there's new young directors. Mm-hmm. James Gunn, I think, is amazing. But Jordan Peele, oh my gosh, Get Out, I thought, because it'd been out like a year, and my son kept saying, you better see it, because if they give away the ending, it'll ruin it for you. And I saw it after it was like a year old, and it was just stunning. Not just a great horror film that really is provocative and makes you consider racial issues and all that, but like one of the all-time greats. It wasn't just one of the best movies of the year. I think it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. Wow. Now I have to go see Us.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm not going to spoil Us for you, but I'll tell you that I think he stepped up his directorial game. He's doing more cinematically.
Okay.
So I think you're going to dig it on those grounds.
I can't wait.
Here is a question from Anna, or Anna, A-N-N-A. What's your favorite thing about voice acting that's not something you get to do with live action?
Come in looking like a slob.
There is that.
Nobody can see you. You don't have to memorize your lines. You read everything. So it's the ultimate lazy actor's dream job. And I'm being sarcastic in a way, because it's you always do your best no matter what medium you're in. But the voiceover community is also so welcoming. You know, you're always nervous when I first went to Broadway, when I first went off Broadway, or wherever, when you're the new kid on the block. They're sort of wary, cautious, that, you know, but like in New York, I realized the fact that I didn't have an entourage, that I took the subway or took a cab, didn't have a personal driver, that I was on time, that I knew my lines, just the simple things, you know, just that. And I tell young actors, the easiest thing you can do is be on time. Mm. And if you know your lines, they're very accepting. And the voiceover community is one of the nicest group of people I've ever worked with. They're so welcoming and supportive, and I think it's because they're so secure in their talent. Doesn't seem to have quite the edgy, cutthroat nature of competitiveness in other fields.
I'm afraid we're running out of time.
Oh, I'll talk
so,
fast.
So I have to ask you one Star Wars question because it's required by law.
Of course.
And then hit you with the lightning round. So my question to you is, what do you wish people would ask you about Star Wars? Because you get asked maybe 100,000 questions about it.
No.
Is there something that's been missed that you wish people would wonder about?
Well, I don't know because, like you say, there have been so many variations on a theme. I've always felt that it was a wonderful concept George had to have the Force because, and with Yoda, you could address aspects of spirituality that make people uncomfortable if you're specifically talking about a religion. And everybody can interpret the Force in a different way. So more than are there questions I wish people would ask me, what strikes me is the insight and the inspiration that the public have conveyed to me over the years, which is just staggering. I mean, I guess because it's so woven into the fabric of their lives and so personalized. You know, they'd say, well, that film got me through my mother's illness. Visiting Children's Hospital and you see a kid with a missing limb and he wants me to have his Luke figure. I said, no, you keep it there. No, I want you to have it. I said, why do you want me to have it? He goes, because when I lost my arm, I knew that I could be successful because Luke lost his hand and he's still a Jedi. And this is an 8-year-old telling you this. So you get the huge lump in your throat and think, gee, it's so satisfying to be able to give back in that way. You're driving home, you sort of save the tears before, because I use gallows humor. You know, you go in, the kid's head shaved, he's got tubes coming out of him. I go, you don't look that sick to me. Hey, you can tell me you're just faking it to get out of homework, right? And they laugh because most people come in and just, you know, so I put on that front. I try and make them laugh. I try and have fun with them, or, you know, if they're playing video games, I play with them and stuff. But it's in the car going home where you think, this makes what I do for a living so trivial, you know, because you're, like I say, you're down at the studio voicing a gangster lobster.
Yeah.
And you go, I should be at the hospital every day. So what's been nice about the sequel trilogy is we've been focusing on charity work. You know, Force for Change is a great charity that Lucasfilm does in conjunction with Disney, and they sort of wanted to hide me away in Force Awakens because the mystery of where is Luke was part of the marketing. And so instead of going on Jimmy Kimmel and doing all the interviews, I'd go with them on tour, but I'd go to the hospitals, which is fine with me. And I'd watch them on Graham Norton. I'd watch them on Jimmy Kimmel, and I really enjoy it. But hopefully I can do more of that in this last go-round.
Okay, I have to hit you with the lightning round questions.
Okay.
What was the last show you binge watched, either because you couldn't stop watching it or you'd gone so far you had to finish?
Better Things, the Pamela Adlon show. Because I adore her. I did a series called Time Squad with her. She is so talented.
Yes.
And one of my favorite women's, one of the best actors that I've ever worked with. And then to see her do this show, she's writing it, she's starring in it, she's directing it. Oh my gosh. And I binge watched it on one of those long transatlantic flights, and it's adorable. It's so close to her without all the obscenities, because this woman would make a sailor blush with the blue language. Oh my gosh. I would like to convey a couple of anecdotes, but I'm mindful that the public is watching.
Right. You'll melt the internet.
She somehow pulls it off because she's tiny and she's adorable. I'll tell these stories to my wife, and my wife will go, ugh.
But if she said...
But then once Mary Lou met Pamela, she gets it. It just somehow works for her.
Okay, what classic TV show do you wish you'd been on?
Oh gosh, what classic. Batman.
There you go.
Seriously, when I was right on the cusp of when it first came on, I'd get mad at my brothers and sisters laughing at it. You know, because to me it was serious. And then I was, I think, 12, 13, and then as it progressed, I might have been a little older, but I went, oh, of course they're sending it up. It is camp. But in terms of just being colorful, although I only saw it on black and white until years later, it was just so crazy and out of nowhere. I probably could come up with a list of many others. I loved Sergeant Bilko, created by Nat Hiken. He also created Car 54, Where Are You? In terms of just farce on television, nobody wrote better than he did. The Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason and Art Carney, those are my favorites. I love vintage comedy, Laurel and Hardy, all of it. Even the Three Stooges. I mean, it's moronic behavior, but it's a kind of vaudevillian burlesque humor that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Same with Abbott and Costello. It doesn't overtly make me laugh, but their movements and just the sheer energy and commitment to stupidity is inspiring.
All right, there's just one more lightning round question I want to ask you. I'm supposed to ask you about your worst acting job, but how about...
No acting job is terrible if you get paid for it.
Can you think of one of the worst mistakes you ever made as an actor, maybe something that is mortifying to you to think of today that you did as an actor?
Well, they offered me Zombieland, and I read it, and I liked...
Murray role?
Yeah, the recent one. I read it, and what I should have done is reached out to the filmmakers, because what turned me off was I read it, and at one point they get to my house. I'm playing myself.
Yeah.
And it's a shrine to Star Wars. Everywhere you look, I've got posters and everything, and if people knew, you come to my house, you would know I was in that film, So that just kind of turned me off. But it shouldn't have turned me off enough to reach out to the filmmakers and say, this is a pretty funny script. Can we work on that element of it? Guess who replaced me? I said, oh my God, Bill Murray.
Yeah.
I said, they should have gone to him first. I like Bill Murray much better than myself.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have worked without Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, well, did they go to his house? He didn't have...
Yeah,
Did they have artifacts of his career?
I think they had some, but it wasn't...
Whatever.
I mean, I think the most
I
iconic
don't
thing
like
is done would
turning
be
people
Ghostbusters,
down.
right?
I really don't. It's not pleasant because, even when you're working on something that you know is terrible, everybody wants to do the best job they can.
Right.
And you can have great fun on a horrible movie or TV set. I do. I mean, if you can't have fun, you're probably in the wrong profession, because it's just fun to be out there and trying, even though because I've done things where you go, I wouldn't even see this on a dare if I weren't in it. And even then, there's lots that I let go. I go, I don't want to see it.
All right, we are like way over time,
Yeah.
but just such a pleasure talking with you.
You can fix it in editing.
This isn't live, is it?
Uh-oh.
Such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on 339 credits or whatever. And
Still hard to believe I'm going to have to go IMDb me. I'm scared of it, really. I've never Googled myself, by the way.
Never?
No.
Can that be true?
Well, I'm too frightened, because what'll happen is you'll see a lot of stuff that's not true, but what can you do about it? Because I rely on Wikipedia more than I should, because people say that a lot of times they get things wrong, or people can go in and insert things. So, no, it's just out of fear that I stay away from the Googling.
Yeah, that might be a good tip to everyone. Don't Google yourself. Nightfall is on the History Channel, and soon Child's Play will be in theaters. So thank you so much for
coming. And the Dark Crystal prequel.
And the Dark Crystal prequel, which I didn't ask you about at all.
You're just plugging until the last second.
This will go on forever.
It's shameless, folks.
All right. You can see these and other chats on letimes.com. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.